welcome into this week's book club reading of Star Wars Aftermath Empire's End by Chuck Wendig. If you are unfamiliar with this series, go ahead and click here and it'll take you back to the beginning. This is book 3 in a trilogy, and the link will take you back to our beginning stages where we went through the first book in the trilogy, or if you want to join us just from the start of this book, go ahead and click here. But basically what we're doing is we're going through this book a couple of chapters at a time, getting into the nitty-gritty with what the themes are, and really discussing what the book's all about. And as you can see, we are making some pretty good distance into this book. So we're talking about chapters 19, 20, and the 5th interlude. So let's get into chapter 19. Mon Mothma is trying to figure out the politics of everything. The Senate is moving away from Chandrila to this new planet that I keep forgetting the name of. Basically, they're going to this other place, and it's this kind of weird in the middle, because right now the Senate is leaving Chandrila, Mon Mothma's homeworld. Eventually, the seat of galactic government will be on Hosnian Prime. Right now, it's on this other world that's neither here nor there. But Mothma is trying to figure out what she's going to do, because she needs to get a military action taken on the planet of Jakku because the entire Empire is there, which is ironic because these books started out with Mon Mothma wanting to reduce the military by 90%. I will never let go of that 90% number. 90%. So she's trying to figure out what to do there, but she's kind of hamstrung because they're in the middle of an election and her opponent does not want her to win, so he's like manipulating things behind the scenes so that she looks really weak on military, which she... Anyway, I'll let the 90% thing go for the rest of this video. He's trying to make her look weak on military, so he's manipulating things so she can't seem... Well, he's trying to make her seem weak as a leader in general, to not be able to get the Senate to go and vote for the thing, to go attack Jakku. And she doesn't want to lose the election, obviously, but she also doesn't want to lose their chance to attack the Empire while they know where they are. And of course, we want them to hurry because Jazz and Nora are in danger. So Mon Mothma has come up with a really interesting scheme. She hops on his ship and basically fakes a quarantine, enacts a quarantine. She intentionally takes some fruit with her that is not allowed on the planet that they're going to, so that they're not allowed to land, which would ultimately delay the vote that they're going to vote on. While they're in space and while they're quarantined, they have a very interesting conversation. And Mon Mothma accuses Wartol of spying on her, of being the one that plants the listening device, as well as being somebody who's manipulating votes to go not her way. And she says that he's sacrificing his morals on the altar to get himself elected. And he has a very interesting response, which is he's from a planet that was attacked by the Empire, that saw war, and the only way they got the Empire to leave him alone is they actually wrecked the resources of his planet, so that the planet would no longer be valuable and the Empire would leave. So he's kind of like, this is my people's MO. We sacrifice so we get our ultimate goal, and he point blank says to Mon Mothma that he thinks she's bad for the Republic, and he's doing what he has to do. And he accuses Mon Mothma of fighting from a place of privilege, that her homeworld was never under attack by the Empire, never at risk of being hurt or destroyed, and so she was fighting not for her world. Now, Mon Mothma sees this as she's not fighting for her world, so, but she's there and everyone else kind of became her people, and she was fighting because it was the right thing to do. He sees it as a weakness. And this is a very interesting thing to me. Now, in full disclosure, I remembered that they get stuck in space together. I don't really remember fully how this resolves. So I'm a little bit reticent to talk too much about the themes, because I might be talking about something, going into it not knowing how it's going to end. I don't want to get too out there. But I do think this is interesting from a certain point of view perspective, right? That's such a big thing in Star Wars, is many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view. Now, Wartol, if he's really spying on Mon Mothma and pulling all these schemes, is not a good guy. And at no point am I going to sit here and be like, Wartol is like the hero we all need. And Mon Mothma, despite issues I have with some of the stuff she's done in this book, I know her to be a good and wise and caring leader. But I do find it interesting that, at least right now, the way Wartol's talking, he has reason to think Mon Mothma is ineffective. You know, if you are coming from this planet that was wrecked in the wake of the Empire, it's going to change your perspective on somebody who's never had to go through that. Other than that, I know Mon Mothma's true character. I don't know that you can really look at that situation and know what's right or wrong in this particular case. Because, you know, if I were seeing myself as a galactic citizen, just galactic citizen 35279 or something, I don't know, and I were looking at this, what Wartol has to say would make some kind of sense to me, but what Mon Mothma has to say would make some kind of sense to me, and that's where these type of things get interesting. That Wartol is not just the mustache twirling, I like power type of person, or at least so he seems right now. He is worried, but he's worried and also wants his own power, and that is often the more compelling villain, for lack of a better word here, to me. Where, and I don't want to get into too much into like the Legends versus canon, but reading through the New Jedi Order right now, there's a lot of Legends senators in a similar time period that are very much, I just don't like people and I'm just going to do things this way. That can kind of be fun in its own right to read, because you never really know what those people are going to do. But to read somebody that might have some logic behind what they're doing. I mean, he's set up to be a scary political opponent for Mon Mothma. That past of his is something that makes him somebody who could beat her in an election. So then let's get on to chapter 20. Chapter 20 is kind of our A team here. We have Han, Singer, Condor, Jom, and Timon that are all on this new scheme. So basically, Wartol has these 5 senators that are under his control and will do whatever he wants them to do. And they're also the votes that flipped against Mon Mothma that caused her to just barely lose the petition to go to Jakku. So they're trying to find these people, figure out why they voted the way they did, and get them to flip their votes. So the 5 of them are after these 5 people, and it starts basic enough. You know, they're tracking them down, but then conveniently all at once they either get distracted or go missing or something suspicious happens. And it ends with at least Singer, if not Singer and Condor both, if not others on top of that, getting captured. What I find interesting here, to kind of go back to what I was talking about in chapter 19, is what you have is Wartol took these 5 senators, manipulated their votes so that they'd vote the way he wanted them to do. Now what we have is our 5 heroes going to do the same thing, and it makes me think of the propaganda campaign from Aftermath Prime, where Nora had them fake Singer killing Timon, so it looked like an Imperial officer killing an innocent child, and broadcasting that. And it was this idea of that's ultimately why the people rose against the Empire, but it was ultimately a lie, but it was ultimately a lie that was reflecting things that did happen, they just happened to not have proof about it. And so here, they're mad at Wartol for manipulating votes, and then they're going to go in and try to unmanipulate the vote. And at some level, I think the way they're doing it is different, because presumably they're going to, like, their plan is to find out nefarious means and undo the nefarious means, but it's always interesting to me, you know, just like with Kashyyyk, you have these actions that are deemed good or bad based off of who's doing them. And in many cases, we know that they're good or bad because we do know the characters who are doing them. We do know the motivations. We do know that Mon Mothma has motivations of good and not her own personal power. But the people in the galaxy don't really know that. And so that's something that's always kind of interesting for me to read. This is something that's recently, as I've read different things, as I've watched some movies that have come out, that's kind of been on my head, is this, or in my mind, is this idea of main character, like protagonist motivations, is like this idea that main characters kind of get away with certain things that side characters wouldn't, or they get rescued when side characters wouldn't, that sort of thing. Now, to these guys' credit, they're not trying to do another Kashyyyk. They're trying to do like legal action to go against Jakku, so they are trying to do it a little bit different, especially because they know they're outmatched on Jakku. But it's just interesting. You know, you're reading a book about rebels, and rebels are going to rebel. You know what I mean? And so that's something that kind of keeps coming to my mind as I read this, is why. And I don't even know that this is a question that Wendig wants us to ask, This is just a question I kind of find myself asking as a basis of other things that I've been reading, is why is what the main characters are doing okay, and why is what Wartel doing is wrong? And I don't mean that in, well, Wartel's really right, or everyone's right, or everyone's wrong. I think there are answers, I think there are reasons, and I think there are ways that our main characters are right, and the characters that are antagonists, villain might not be the right word, but antagonist, are wrong. I want to explore why. I like thinking about why am I okay with these 5 characters doing what they're doing, and why am I not okay with this other character doing what he's doing. And I do believe those answers are there, but it is also something that I think is important to think about, if that makes sense. And to what those answers are, I'm going to wait and see how the story plays out, because I don't really remember, but I'm content with letting that question linger as we go forward. So with that, we'll get to Interlude 5, which takes place on Coruscant. This is another really, really good interlude. At this point, I mean, they're concluding so many stories. We have Masameda, who has appeared both in interludes and in the main story. I think the last time we saw him, he was talking to Sloane. In Life Debt? It would have had to have been Life Debt, because Rax is not in Prime except for the very end. So it was in Life Debt. Now, Ameda is trapped, basically, in his own palace. Rax has sent him a message that says, hey, you're still in charge, except for you're not, and basically tells him he's a figurehead. That for all intents and purposes, people are going to think he's in charge of the Empire, and Rax is still just a counselor, but he's basically still in service to Rex. He's injured because he's under guard, and if he tries to escape, they attack him, that sort of thing. He's had to, under duress, give messages, propaganda messages, saying that Rax is this great leader. Like, he's really got a bad thing going right now. And Ameda's having to watch Coruscant fall from the Imperial office. He's basically looking out the window, seeing stuff going on, not really knowing who's fighting and what's going on, because he's not getting any kind of news. He assumes it's the criminal underbelly, because it wouldn't be the Republic all the way into Coruscant already. I do kind of like the notion of he actually went against how Palpatine felt about something. He didn't like that Palpatine was so okay with being nice to the criminal syndicates, which is something Ameda wasn't about, but he was also never going to speak against Palpatine openly about that sort of thing. And then Ameda finds himself under attack from the group called the Ankle Biters that we've seen in a couple of the different interludes. Specifically, we're going to meet up again with Iggs, who we met from Aftermath Prime, the 12th interlude. He was the kid that was on Naboo, up for adoption, and snuck away, not to be confused with the kid on Naboo in this book who was hanging out with Jar Jar. 2 different kids. But Iggs was from Aftermath Prime and didn't think anybody was going to adopt him, and so he snuck away to get back into Coruscant, to get back into the fight. Here we see him back in the fight. The kids came to kill Ameda because they think he's the head of the Empire and think that they can strike a blow to the Empire, and find out that it's not going to work because he is even more of a prisoner than they are on the planet of Coruscant. One thing I really liked here is they climbed into his office through a laundry chute, and Ameda compares them coming in through the laundry chute to the proton torpedo in the Death Star, and wonders to himself if the rebels weren't doing this on purpose, weren't designing things with flaws, which of course is a shout out to Rogue One, which I just thought was kind of funny. And then later on, he asks Iggs if they're rebels, and Iggs is just like, we rebel, which makes me think of Jyn Erso's line. So there were a lot of Rogue One vibes going on in this book, which makes sense because this was coming out around the same time as Rogue One. And basically the kids come in and they make a deal with Ameda to have, like, they'll get him out of the building, and then he's going to go to the Republic and try to get the Republic to either recognize his surrender or send troops to Coruscant. What the kids don't realize is that he's tried this before and it didn't work. He, of course, doesn't tell them that because he wants to use the kids to get him out. So that's my look at these 3 passages. I'm kind of looking through my notes here. I feel like there were a lot of other, like, small odds and ends I wanted to talk about, but we're kind of getting up there in time duration, so I will leave that to if you guys have anything you want to say in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you guys in the comment section. For next week, let's read chapters 21 and 22, so just those chapters 21 and 22. And we will have fun getting on with the story. If you're not already, please follow us on all of the different social medias. And with that, I will talk to you guys next week.